Coldwater, a city known for its chilling fog. Every evening it crept in, thick, eerie, blanketing the streets. This fog was more than just weather. It was a presence. It whispered secrets. The residents felt it. They knew to keep their heads down, doors locked. The fog held the city captive. The old district was worse. Buildings stood abandoned. Shadows danced in the dim streetlights. The fog clung to everything here. It amplified the silence. Whispers seemed to hide in every corner. This place held its breath, waiting for something to break the uneasy truce. The heart of Coldwater beat differently. It was a city that had seen too much. A city that knew how to hide its scars. But the fog couldn't hide everything. Not anymore. Tonight, something sinister stirred beneath the surface. The fog itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Detective Sarah Mercer was different. She didn't shy away from the shadows. She met Coldwater's darkness head-on. Sarah knew this city. Every street, every corner, every shadow that flickered in the dim streetlights held a story. Sarah had seen it all, or so she thought. Years on the force had hardened her. She'd seen the worst of humanity, the violence, the despair. It had left its mark, but it had also ignited a fire in her, a determination to bring justice to the darkness, to be a beacon in the fog. Her phone buzzed, a jarring sound in the quiet apartment. It was her partner, Detective Jack Thompson. His voice was tense, urgent. "Sarah, we've got a situation." Sarah's gut clenched. She could hear it in his voice. This was no ordinary night. This was something different. Something that would test even her. Something that lurked in the heart of the fog, waiting to be revealed. "What's happened?" Sarah asked, already reaching for her coat. Her voice was calm, steady. Years on the force had taught her the importance of keeping a cool head, even when every instinct screamed at her to run towards the danger. "There's been a murder, Sarah." Jack's voice was barely a whisper now, heavy with what he'd seen. "In the old district. It's gruesome. You need to see this. The old district." Even over the phone, Sarah could feel the chill of that place seep through the receiver. A place where the fog clung tighter, whispered louder. A place where the city's darkness felt most at home. She hung up the phone, the echo of Jack's words ringing in her ears. Gruesome. That word hung in the air, a premonition of the horror that awaited. Sarah pulled on her coat, the familiar weight settling on her shoulders like a shield. Tonight, she would face whatever whispered in the fog. She would be ready. The alley was narrow, choked by encroaching shadows from the buildings on either side. The yellow police tape seemed to glow in the darkness, a macabre beacon cutting through the swirling fog. The air hung heavy, thick with the metallic scent of blood and the bitter tang of fear. Sarah could feel the alley's grip the moment she stepped inside. It was a place forgotten by time and light. A place where secrets festered and whispered to the fog. The officers moved like ghosts, their faces pale and drawn in the flickering light of the street lamps. "Over here, Sarah." Jack's voice was low, barely audible above the whispers of the fog. He stood beside a dumpster, his face illuminated by the harsh glare of a flashlight. Beside him, a shape lay beneath a white sheet, its form unmistakably human. Sarah knelt beside the body, the cold pavement seeping through her trousers. She lifted the sheet slowly, steeling herself for the sight that awaited. The young woman's face was pale, her eyes staring vacantly into the fog. But it was the message carved into her forehead that stole Sarah's breath. Silence the whispers. The words were etched with chilling precision, each stroke a testament to the killer's cold-bloodedness. This wasn't just murder, it was a statement, a message delivered in blood and shadow. "Any witnesses?" Sarah asked, her voice betraying none of the turmoil raging within her. Jack shook his head, his jaw clenched tight. No one saw anything. It's like he just vanished into the fog. His voice dropped to a whisper. This wasn't random, Sarah. This was personal. He wanted to send a message. Back at the precinct, the fluorescent light seemed harsher than usual, casting long shadows that danced with the fatigue pulling at Sarah's eyelids. The victim's face, forever frozen in a silent screen, lingered in her mind's eye. The message, "Silence the whispers," echoed through the sterile room, a chilling mantra that refused to be ignored. Jack pushed a file across the table, the paper slapping against the worn surface. Emily Carter, 28, journalist for the Coldwater Chronicle. His voice was a tired rasp, mirroring the exhaustion etched on both their faces. Known for her investigative pieces, digging into the underbelly of Coldwater. Sarah opened the file, Emily's picture staring back at her, a younger, vibrant reflection of the lifeless form she'd encountered earlier. Emily's eyes, full of life and determination in the photo, were now eternally shrouded in the cold embrace of death. The discrepancy sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. Her last article, Jack continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur, was about the disappearances, the ones plaguing Coldwater for months now. He tapped a finger on a particular file, his gaze unwavering. "She was getting too close, Sarah. I can feel it in my gut." Emily's apartment was a study in contrasts. The chaos of a life interrupted, papers strewn across every surface, books piled haphazardly, half-eaten takeout containers littering the coffee table, clashed with the meticulous organisation of the corkboard dominating one wall. Newspaper clippings, photographs, and handwritten notes, all connected by a web of red string, painted a picture of a mind obsessed with uncovering the truth. Sarah ran a gloved hand over the surface of the desk, her fingers tracing the outline of a half-finished article titled "Whispers in the Fog: Coldwater's Disappearing Act." The title alone sent a chill down her spine. Emily had been onto something that had gotten her killed. "Jack, look at this!" Sarah's voice was tight with a mixture of excitement and dread. She held up a worn notebook, its pages filled with a jumble of cryptic notes and symbols that seemed both familiar and utterly foreign. Jack leaned closer, his brow furrowed in concentration. "These symbols," he muttered, his voice barely a whisper. They matched the ones found at the previous disappearances, the ones the department dismissed as runaways or accidental deaths. The symbols were like nothing Sarah had ever seen before, a combination of ancient runes and cryptic markings that seemed to pulsate with an eerie energy. They were more than just symbols. They were whispers from a forgotten time, a language spoken in shadows and secrets. Hours melted away as Sarah and Jack pored over the notebook, cross-referencing the symbols with old case files, dusty tomes on forgotten lore, and anything else they could find that might offer a clue to their meaning. The deeper they delved, the more convinced they became that Emily had stumbled upon something sinister, something that stretched far beyond the fog-choked streets of Coldwater. "The Whisperers," Sarah breathed, the name escaping her lips like a long-held secret. She could almost feel the weight of the name in the air, a suffocating presence that sent shivers down her spine. Jack's head snapped up, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and dawning realization. The secret society, the one whispered about in hushed tones, the one everyone dismisses as a myth. "They're real, Jack," Sarah said, her voice firm despite the tremor running through her. "And they're responsible for the disappearances, for Emily's death. And I think they're just getting started." The old library stood nestled between a pawnshop and a boarded-up bakery, its once grand facade now faded and cracked like a forgotten dream. Rain pattered against the grimy windows, mimicking the relentless rhythm of Sarah's thoughts. The air inside was thick with the scent of aged paper and forgotten stories, a musty fragrance that spoke of countless hours lost in the pursuit of knowledge. Martha, the librarian, was a woman who seemed as ancient as the building itself, her silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, her eyes magnified behind thick spectacles. She peered at Sarah and Jack over a stack of dusty books, her gaze sharp and wary, like a bird guarding its nest. "Emily Carter," Sarah said, her voice echoing softly in the hushed silence of the library. "We understand she was a frequent visitor here." Martha's gaze flickered, a fleeting shadow of unease crossing her wrinkled features. "Emily was a bright young woman," she said, her voice a dry whisper, "always eager to learn, especially about the history of Coldwater." "She was particularly interested in old records," Jack pressed, his voice steady and reassuring. "Legends, secret societies, that sort of thing." Martha's gaze darted towards the shadowy recesses of the library, her fingers tightening around the edges of her cardigan. "There are whispers," she said, her voice barely audible above the gentle rustling of turning pages. "Stories passed down through generations, stories about a group known only as the Whisperers." Sarah leaned closer, her gaze unwavering. "What kind of stories, Martha?" Martha's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. "They say the Whisperers have been around for centuries, pulling the strings from the shadows, controlling everything, influencing every aspect of life in Coldwater." "Control how?" Jack pressed, skepticism tinging his voice. "What kind of influence are we talking about?" Martha's gaze returned to Sarah, her eyes filled with a chilling certainty. "They control businesses, politics, even the police." She lowered her voice even further, her words barely a breath. "They silence anyone who gets too close to their secrets, anyone who threatens their power." A cold knot of dread tightened in Sarah's stomach. Emily's murder, the cryptic message, the whispered rumors. It was all starting to make a terrifying kind of sense. The Whisperers were real, and they were more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. "Do you know where we can find them, Martha?" Sarah asked, her voice soft but insistent. "Where do the Whisperers gather?" Martha hesitated, her gaze flitting nervously towards the library's entrance. "There's an old mansion," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "On the outskirts of the city, hidden away, shrouded in fog. They say that's where they meet, where they plot and scheme." The old car rumbled down the deserted highway, its headlights cutting through the thick fog like feeble knives. The further they drove from the city's flickering lights, the denser the fog became, swallowing the world beyond the windshield in a swirling white abyss. Sarah gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white against the worn leather. The mansion's location, whispered by Martha with a mixture of fear and resignation, was burned into her memory. A place hidden in plain sight, shrouded in fog and legend. A place where secrets whispered and shadows danced. "You feel that?" Jack asked, his voice barely audible above the hum of the engine and the rhythmic swish of the wipers. "The silence," Sarah replied, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. "Or the weight of it?" Jack shivered, pulling his coat tighter around him. "Both. Feels like we're driving into the belly of the beast." The mansion loomed before them, a Gothic silhouette against the swirling fog. Its windows were dark, lifeless eyes staring out at the encroaching night. Sarah cut the engine, the sudden silence amplifying the sense of isolation that pressed down on them like a physical weight. They moved through the overgrown gardens like shadows themselves, their footsteps muffled by the damp grass. The air grew colder as they approached the mansion, the scent of decay clinging to the fog like a shroud. "Side door," Jack whispered, nodding towards a shadowy alcove half hidden by ivy. The lock was old, rusty, but it yielded to Sarah's touch with a groan that echoed through the stillness. They slipped inside, the darkness swallowing them whole. "Over there!" Jack hissed, his voice a strained whisper. He pointed towards a faint glow emanating from beneath a heavy oak door at the end of the hallway. Sarah's heart pounded against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat urging her forward. She pressed her ear against the cold wood, straining to decipher the muffled voices filtering through the cracks. Can't let them interfere. Silence them permanently. The voices were low, laced with a chilling calmness that sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. There was no mistaking the chilling implication of their words. They were trapped, hunted by an enemy who played by their own twisted rules. Adrenaline surged through Sarah's veins, a potent cocktail of fear and determination. They had stumbled into the lion's den, uncovered the whispers that haunted Coldwater, but their fight was far from over. They had to escape, had to bring the truth to light before the shadows swallowed them whole. A floorboard creaked, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the oppressive silence. Footsteps, getting closer. Sarah's hand instinctively went to her holster, her fingers wrapping around the cold steel of her service weapon. There was no turning back. "We have to move," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the pounding of her heart. Jack nodded, his eyes reflecting the same steely resolve that burned in her own. They slipped out of the room, their movements swift and silent, their bodies melting into the shadows like phantoms. The mansion seemed to close in around them, a labyrinth of dark corridors and hidden passages, each turn a gamble, every shadow a potential threat. The streets of Coldwater seemed different in the aftermath. The fog still rolled in, a familiar embrace, but the whispers it carried had changed. They no longer spoke of fear and uncertainty, but of hope and resilience. The city, once shrouded in shadow, was slowly awakening to a new dawn. The trial of the Whisperers sent shockwaves through Coldwater. The revelations of their crimes, their grip on the city's institutions, shook the community to its core. But from the ashes of that darkness rose a newfound determination, a collective will to rebuild, to reclaim their city from the shadows. Sarah stood on the steps of the precinct, watching the city come alive. The familiar sounds of car horns and distant sirens were no longer a soundtrack to fear, but a testament to the city's enduring spirit.